According to the National Center for Drug Abuse, over 165 million Americans ages 12 and up are currently abusing drugs or alcohol. Of those 165 million Americans, there is a mom, dad, sister, brother, wife, husband, son, daughter, or grandparent praying and pleading that they would stop. Addiction is a subject most people don't like to talk about and is kept behind closed doors. But the Finding Hope podcast will bring light to the subject and give families that are living in shame, guilt, hopelessness, fear, worry, and anger tools and education to find strength, peace, happiness, joy, and hope. Hello, I'm Amy LaRue, Finding Hope Coordinator for Hope is Alive Ministries and your host for this Finding Hope podcast. At Hope is Alive, our mission is to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. We do this through our intentional next level sober living homes and faith-based support groups for the loved ones of addicts called Finding Hope. Thank you for joining us today. I want to remind you about our upcoming Finding Hope retreats that are hitting the road this year. We saw a huge impact on the retreats last year, and we can't wait to head to Tennessee, California, Nebraska, Texas, and Florida. So be sure to check out our show notes and register for our upcoming retreat, Restored Hope. But today I'm sitting here with Darcie, and I thought today, Darcie, we would just sit back and reflect over our 10-year celebration of Finding Hope.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay. Have you recovered?
Slowly but surely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are just getting over the 10-year celebration, had all of our 75 leaders who came to Oklahoma City to celebrate. Mm-hmm. And what an incredible weekend.
It was so good. It filled my cup so much.
Yes. And so let's just dive right in. So we had, like I said, we had 75 leaders that came in from Hawaii to Illinois to Idaho to Mexico, South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, all over came in to celebrate what God has been doing in this ministry. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, Darcie, but just to see the impact that Finding Hope is continuing to have across our nation is just incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. And to see them all together most of them hadn't met each other in person. And that got me choked up one part.
We hadn't met some of them in person.
Yes.
We've done Zoom meetings with them, lots of phone calls, but we hadn't even met them in person.
Yeah.
And just to hear the impact that Finding Hope, we see the impact here in Oklahoma. We see it firsthand.
Yes.
And we hear it on the phone, but to see it and hear the stories. I think about our leaders in California, and they were just sharing that first meeting. First of all, they're like, what is Finding Hope? Is this a legit thing? We've never heard of it here in California. But they bought in, they believed in it, and they have been doing an incredible job.
Yes.
And just hearing them how that first meeting, they said just no one wanted to share. Everyone looked scared. They didn't want to talk, all of that. But it hasn't even been a year yet.
Yeah.
They've been having this meeting, and already they are seeing a huge difference that people come in with smiles. They're hugging each other, and they're growing together. They're supporting each other like a family.
Yes.
And praying together with each other.
Yeah.
What was a big aha moment for you?
So it was cool to see. We have a couple different Zoom groups that meet and seeing the leaders because we encourage our leaders to attend different meetings, and of course when you're on a Zoom group it's hard to attend meetings if there's not any in your location, and several of them attend each other's meetings, and it was so cool to see them come together and get to meet in person for the first time, and them just being so encouraging of each other and them continuing to lead meetings. And I just got choked up because a girl that attends my meeting now leads one of our other Zoom meetings, and she was attending another meeting, and they got to meet for the first time. And then another leader had in North Carolina had a member fly out here to come to our conference and everything. And it's just so cool to see what God's doing. And I didn't even know that she was coming until the leader out there said, "This is the person that attends my meeting." It just touched my heart so much.
Well, I love that you said that. Sometimes we think, well, is Zoom, does it really make a big impact? Like, oh, there's not an in-person. I don't want to be on Zoom, but like to see that firsthand and the impact, like these Zoom, and like they truly are a family. They came and hugged each other. They cried together. It was just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
So we got to celebrate just with the leaders. So they came in on a Thursday. We celebrated. We had some worship. We had a comedian. We laughed together. We prayed together. And we got to worship. It was just a beautiful day. But we also got to honor Tanya.
Yes.
And that was just a special moment, I know, for me personally, because of her and her obedience to reaching out to Hope is Alive founder Lance Lang and saying, what do you have for the families?
Yeah.
Because of her taking that step and not letting the enemy keep her from taking that step, that we have all these meetings now, and that we got to honor her, and she got to see the fruits of that as well. And to have her be a part of that was just so special to me.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I was so thankful that she was here, and she got to like just soak it all in and see it. Like, I don't, like, sometimes we just get busy and don't think about it, but she got to see the impact that her stepping out 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And so we got to celebrate. And then the next day, we did some learning with them, right?
Yes.
But actually, God took us a little bit on a different direction. Like, we celebrate how many years people have been leaders, and just everyone's like, I want to know where they're from. What are they,
Yeah.
And getting to share how people found out about Finding Hope and their journey as a leader was very special. And I think it was very special to those other leaders as well.
Yeah.
And but we had a speaker that morning.
We did. Yeah.
And he talked about abiding, right? What does it mean to abide? That John 15, and I think, we hear the word sometimes. Some of these words in the Christian world might be buzzwords, right? Oh, I know I need to abide and all that. And so Dave talked about the circle of abiding. So when we talk about the circle of abiding, Darcie, what was he talking about in that?
So he was just like, any situation that comes up, are you abiding in that circle? Are you stepping out of it? Or are you trusting the Lord in whatever circumstance comes up? And it was just really neat to hear him, because, we get so caught up in the day-to-day thing. Are we truly abiding in his will? Yeah.
And when we're abiding, he talked about being aware of God's presence, right? When we're in that circle of abiding, we're aware of his presence. Like you're saying, we're surrendering to God's will, and we're seeking his guidance. I think a lot of times we say we are, but are we really seeking God's guidance when we think we know the path? And I think that's a good reminder to anyone listening. Like, we have to seek his guidance, not our will, but his will and his guidance taking us. Yeah. And to remember, when we abide, we're interacting with him.
Yes.
It's those moments. It's the moments in the car. Are you interacting with him? Do you hear his voice? Are you meditating? All those things. All that. It's like a friend, like you and I. We talk. We have conversations. Yes, we have work conversations, but we have real life conversations. Right. And those is just the same as we need to be having with God in those situations. And, he talked about when we abide in that circle, we're taking our thoughts captive.
Yes.
And I think, many times, actually my daughter just yesterday, we were in the car and I don't even know what we were talking about, but she's like, Mom, I saw this poster. A thought can turn to, like, she's talking through, like, I'm like, where are you coming from, child? But like, our thoughts sometimes those words can come out and then to an action and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got to and we've talked about it on the podcast a few times about taking those thoughts captive. And then the last part of it, he also talked about when we're abiding in God's circle, in this circle of abiding, that we have that praise and thanksgiving. Are we thanking God? Every morning, are we having that gratitude, right?
Right.
What are we grateful for? And sharing that with God. I love it when people share, I'm so great, thank you for this, and it makes us feel good. Like, okay, someone sees the hard work we're doing. Like, we need to be doing that to the Lord every day and continuing to abide in that as well.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was he told us, and he challenged us, and you kind of referenced it, is when we go through these storms, when we go through even like maybe in traffic, right? We're in traffic, we're hitting every red light, or, people don't know how to do a 4-way stop. I don't know.
Right.
I hit 4-way stops the whole way work, and it really makes me, okay,
yes.
Lord, anyways, but he said when we're in those moments, we need to ask, what exactly do you want me to trust you here for?
Yeah, that's good.
Is like, what am I trusting you? Like, am I trusting you? And he talked about these 7 steps. And like, when we truly are trusting him, when we're truly surrendering to his will, that's when that abiding and when, it's just incredible to see what the Lord can do in that.
Yes. Yeah.
So I know that was really powerful for me, but also for our leaders to hear that, to remind them. And I hope those that are listening, that's a good reminder to you as well. Like, are we abiding? And when we are we asking God, like, what do I need to trust you with in this situation?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
And then we let our leaders, they had some fun that afternoon, but then you and I shifted gears to get ready for Night of Hope. And we've talked about that on here, what Night of Hope was. Yeah. And so share a little bit about what Night of Hope was like for you.
So Night of Hope was, it was just so good to see that sanctuary full of people searching for hope, bringing people that they know need some hope, celebrating sobriety. Something that happened because we do the sobriety countdown every time we have Night of Hope. I might cry. My oldest daughter, was sitting in the same area as I was, like a couple seats down. And after all the people were standing, she texted me because she wasn't right beside me. And she was like, seeing all these people standing makes me so emotional. And so that was a big highlight for me, was just, her getting to see, and celebrate all those people.
Yeah, whether it was 40 years or 1 month, we celebrated, and people yelled and screamed and clapped. It was just a beautiful moment there. And Ben Fuller and his story and his testimony and the worship and just seeing people worshiping and connecting. And I didn't feel like he was like, it felt like he was one of us, and he is one of us.
Absolutely.
It didn't feel like he was above us at any moment. He's like, I'm with you, and sharing his own struggles with substances and what the Lord has done through him was just powerful.
Yeah.
And I actually have heard from several people that have gone to many Nights of Hope that this was their favorite one.
Yes.
And I asked one of our leaders, and I said, why is this one your favorite one? And they were just like, the rawness and the realness that was happening on stage.
Yeah.
And Ben was amazing. And then we had Lisa Turkhurst. And I know she is a favorite of you and I. Yes. And we got a chance to briefly talk with her before. And she is just like you and I and anyone else out there. And she's like, I'm here to serve you guys. I'm here to share. And she shared her testimony. Yeah. And we've heard her testimony, but it was different this time.
Yes.
I felt like she went a little bit deeper this time and really in a safe place to share.
Yes.
Not that she never has before, but I could just see a shift in her because I've heard her speak several times.
Yes.
I don't know if you felt that as well.
100%. I felt like she finally, not like she wasn't in safe places before, but like you said, she was like, I'm with my people and I can share and not feel like, because, when we do share our story a little bit, we can feel a little bit judged. And I felt like she felt safe for maybe one of the first times in her ministry. Yeah,
it was really cool to see. And I love that something she shared. She talked about forgiveness and all of that. But something that really struck me was we talked about, we shared with people, we'd have a VIP, a question and answered. As I was asking her questions, and I asked her a question about self-care because she's in ministry. A lot of us are moms and dads and busy with work and everything. And it's like, what does self-care look like to you?
Yeah.
And she talked a lot about self-care, but one thing that she really struck me, Darcie, was she talked about soul care as well. And it's like, and it goes back to what Dave had almost talked about that abiding and how are we taking care of ourselves in that way. So remembering to have not just self-care, but that soul care, taking care of us spiritually as well.
Yeah, that was good.
Did anything else stand out to you?
During her message, like you said, she talked about forgiveness, but a big thing that stood out to me is the whole point of her forgiveness was don't live in that resentment. because it can keep you from what God's leading you to do.
That's
like
so
her
good.
story that she shared, she didn't want to talk to anybody on the plane, and the Lord was like, no, and she could have not listened because she was in a very bitter season, but she did. And then just how that blessed somebody else's life and led that person to their salvation, and then led his family to his salvation. And like just being like, we could, if we stay in that forgiveness and bitterness, it can keep us from reaching and growing the kingdom.
Absolutely. And she says every morning she gets down on her knees and asks God, show me who I need to forgive today and someone to bless today.
Yes.
And to have that mindset right away, like, okay, I mean, it's like traffic, a 4-way stop I was talking about. Like, I might have to forgive that person that doesn't know how to do a 4-way stop. It's the little things where sometimes I think we think forgiveness has to be something big or something that someone's done to us, but it's those little things, and like I was talking this before we came in here, I had some technical issues yesterday emailing, and you're like, Amy, like, you're human, and so sometimes that forgiveness is like, I have to forgive myself in that state, right? And it's to remember to give myself grace and forgiveness like I would give you.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
But it was an incredible night, and I mean, I'm still just in awe of what God has done and the stories I'm hearing out of it. I was talking to one of our leaders yesterday, and she said, so their son is in our program, our Hope is Alive program, in our recovery homes. And she said all of a sudden they were singing and worshiping, and their son just came between them and just put his arms around them and just was worshiping with them. Like, in just that moment of, and I think back to the story of who, the people, like, they came to finding hope when he was in the depths of his addiction. Depths. Didn't even know we had recovery homes, so it was just in that place of desperation for finding hope in that community. And they did, and they lead a meeting, and their son did make it into one of our homes, and they stepped out of the way, and it was his decision and his path. But he's about to celebrate 17 months of sobriety, and like that moment of putting the arms around both your parents, she's like, I didn't even know where he came from. And it was just a beautiful moment of chains being broken and hope being restored. So it was,
that's beautiful.
I could go on and on and on. But our next day we did Night of Hope, and then we had our first ever Hope Conference, which, man, it was hard getting up that morning. I'm not going to lie.
It was.
But I'm so grateful we did.
Yes.
And we started it out with worship, and we had people from all over. Like, we had people that flew in, like you were saying, from North Carolina. We had someone drive from Colorado, all over to be a part of it. And a lot of them, the ones that I talked to, and it was men and women. It wasn't just women, which I loved. Is like, I just want to learn more about addiction and learn some tools, but I just need education. And that's what it was. Like, it was a lot of learning and educating those that were there. And it started out with our co-CEO, Allison Lang.
Yes.
She brought a fire message and talked a little bit about addiction as a brain. And then she kind of shifted it to, are we asking, and it goes back to the whole abiding, how it all works together. Are we asking the Lord for a solution, or are we trying to be the solution?
Yes.
And she kept using the word yield, right? We need to yield. Are we yielding to God's solution in this? And in that yielding to God, there's opportunities. And, it was just so powerful. She's always a dynamic speaker, and just wisdom, funny, all the above. She's phenomenal. And so, what was a big takeaway for you from her talk?
Just reminding, because, she knows because she is a loved one, somebody that loves somebody that has struggled with addiction, how we like to control. And that keeps us from yielding and keeps God working it out how he wants it to. And so we just have to remember to step back, and God's already has the answers. We just have to trust him. And what is he wanting us to learn in that situation? Because when we try to control, we're controlling what we learn from it, what our loved one learns from it. And ultimately we just have to surrender to him and let him be the solution in both of our lives.
Absolutely. And after her talk, and she also talked about sharing the stories, right? And all of that. I saw one of our leaders and a dear friend. She actually started coming to Finding Hope before leading. So I would go up and talk to Allie. And it's one of those, like, I just kind of sat back, and she later found me, and I know you were there for part of it. And she finally got the freedom at that point. She had been holding some stuff in, and she finally at that point felt God lifting it and that she needed to share it. So she started with Allie, then with us. And she's like, Amy, I'm going to go back to my group and share that. I don't feel like it's my place to share right now, but like just to know, like, God is working and moving, and the healing that's going to happen just from her doing that. And I heard from one of her daughters too about how God is using that, and the trust that she's having with God, and God said it's going to be okay.
Yes.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Then we had Amber Hollingsworth, addiction specialist, and she has an amazing podcast called Put the Shovel Down.
Yes.
And she talked about addiction is contagious. And I've never seen this visual. I mean, I've heard it, and it's really cool. So she set the stage. What did she put on the stage?
She put a whiteboard and 2 chairs.
So there's 2 chairs, right? And so on the chair, she had a baby's blanket.
Yeah.
And like a black sheet. And so I just want you guys to close your eyes and visualize, unless you're driving, please don't.
Yes.
So she had these 2 chairs, and on the first chair, she put the baby's blanket. And then she slowly started putting this black blanket representing addiction, and kept covering it and covering it. And just how addiction, it might start out small and then it totally consumes. But I love the visual, because we know underneath that blanket, underneath addiction, there's that real person, that child that God created, whether that child is 40 years old, 50 years old, or 15 years old.
Yeah.
But then she also showed how next to that chair is a family member or a friend, and how that black sheet eventually makes its way over on the family.
Yeah.
And just how addiction is contagious in that sense. It's like it impacts you and I and everyone around it.
Yes.
And, you know, we've talked about it at Finding Hope a lot, the parallel feelings of, you know, the isolation, the lying, and all the things, and just how impactful. But she also talked about, like, once we start to break away as loved ones from and start our own healing journey, and that addiction starts to come off of us. Yeah. It slowly starts to come off our loved one. And it was just a big visual. And I love that she used a baby's blanket, because I always say, who you're talking to that's under the influence is not that same person. Correct. You're talking to a disease at that moment. Yes. You're not talking to your loved one, in that how we have to really separate both of those. Yeah. Yeah. What stood out to you?
We share this all the time too. And because I have kids, I just reminding them, I wish they would have been there for her session, just because she can explain it so much better than I can. But them being able to see the visual of it is a family disease and how it does affect us. And like you said, you know, when we're doing our healing, despite what our loved one is doing, you know, eventually at some point, you know, we will break free from that addiction, whether our loved one does or not. But then it can go off. Like, our healing can go into our loved one's healing as well.
Yeah. It was just amazing, beautiful. And then we had Mark Woodward, one of my favorite speakers. He's from Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics here in Oklahoma. And a couple of reasons I love him. He actually started coming and he shared this, so I feel like it's okay that I share it. He started coming to Finding Hope when it first kicked off as well, but not as an officer of Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, right? As a family member. And it just shows that addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter your upbringing. It doesn't matter your family's jobs. I mean, he deals with drugs every day, right? Like I see him post, and he's on the news about catching, you know, a big bust or whatever it might be. But he, you know, he had so much information. We probably could have sat there all day listening to him. 100%. And he talks a lot about drug trends. And one thing, and it might be, some people might not like what we're about to say, but we're going to talk about it, is that marijuana. And some are like, oh, it's just, you know, I used it as a kid, all the things. But he right there is like, this is not the same marijuana that you used many years ago. Right. It is different. And he shared some stories about just some stories in the news about like a shooting at a house. And this guy was just kind of irate, and the officers couldn't get him calmed down. You know, they tased him, they tased him and all these things, and they couldn't get. And ultimately, you know, they had to, you know, shoot him and to get him to calm down and all of that. When they did the drug test on him, people were like, oh, he's got PCP, all this stuff. The only thing in his system was marijuana. And how it's more potent than people really realize, and how it is still a mind-altering substance out there. And then, you know, it's just very eye-opening. I've heard him share this many times. I'm always in awe of like, oh my goodness.
I know.
Talked about these diamonds, these marijuana diamonds, that competitions of who can not have a seize and pass out first. And so like it's impacting.
Yes.
And of course he talked about fentanyl and some of the other drug trends going on right now.
Yeah.
And one thing I know that really spoke to me, and I don't know if it spoke to you as a mom, is us with kids.
Yes.
And he's like, you know, one thing I took from him from before my kids even had cell phones is, I pay for the cell phone. Actually, I had this conversation yesterday with my kid. It's my cell phone.
Yes.
I let you borrow it. And so he even says, just like with his kids, he would just hold his hand out and be like, give me your phone. And he wouldn't even look at the phone. He would look at their eye contact and see how they're acting, because kids are so smart. There's, you know, apps that look like apps that aren't really the right apps. They use emojis to communicate. And so just if something feels off, like just go with your gut. Like, and so like my kids, they are not allowed to have their phones in their room at night. I will randomly check their phones and just the different things as a parent that just really spoke to me in all of that.
Oh, yeah.
What spoke to you?
Pretty much the same thing. Like you said, I pay for the phone. You don't. So you're going to let me see it. My kids aren't allowed to have their phones in their room either. And then if they're going in their room and shutting the door, they don't have the right to close the door. Like, make sure why are they going in their room with their phone and closing the door? Like, stuff like that. Just, you have the right as a parent to go, hey, you don't pay rent here. You don't pay for this. It's mine. Because they will come back and say, well, it's mine. You know who pays for it. And so, that was a good reminder. Like, it's okay to set those boundaries, not only to like as a parent, but protect your children too. Yeah.
And watching body language.
Yes.
Like, is there a certain sweatshirt they don't want you to ever touch or wash?
Yes.
You know, those little things that is like, oh, you know, and we want to trust our kids, but our kids are not our best friends.
Right.
We're still their parent, you know? And so we have to just remember that.
Yeah.
But the information he shared was just phenomenal. And I'm going to try to get him on this podcast too, so that we can learn more. You guys can learn more from him as well. Yeah. And then we closed it with what?
The Hope panel.
Okay.
It was so good.
What was so good about it?
I just loved hearing the different perspective. We had somebody on there that had lost somebody due to the impact of addiction. We had a Finding Hope mom on there. And then we had a husband, which I don't know that we've ever had a husband talk before. And then we had 2 graduates of our program.
So all sorts of perspectives, you know, those that we're all in recovery, but those that are in recovery from substances and those that are in recovery from loving someone that struggles. And it was like just hearing from Shane, not my husband, Shane, but, you know, our leader, Shane, that his wife, just sharing his perspective as a husband and how it's okay for men. Like, too many times we have to pull up our bootstraps and be the strong one, but how important it was for him to be able to feel through that, and the emotions, you could still sense it. His wife's 15 years sober, which is incredible, and she was with us all weekend as well. And then, like, I think about Chris and her perspective, and I'm gonna put a big plug. She just launched a book sharing her story, losing Lexi, and just hearing that and how scary it can be to be vulnerable in that, but how sharing your story can help somebody else. And it's not just helping someone else. There's so much healing that happens within that. And I love what Sean said. Lance pulled it out of him about his wife. So he's a husband. Was in our recovery program. He's one of our alumni. He was on the podcast not too long ago. That's right. And he said, you know, a lot of times us that have been married or have someone in a sober living home, we want them home because we're doing all these things with kids and all this, like, you know, we're paying a mortgage and paying rent. But when he came to her, or one of the program managers said, are you ready for he can graduate, or do you want 6 more months? She immediately said 6 more months, because she knew the impact of him being in the home and continuing to work on him in that safe environment.
Yes.
And Sean will tell you now, like, that was one of the best things his wife could have done. And Leslie has been phenomenal. She came to Finding Hope, like all of the things. And so it's just cool to see the impact, you know, this ministry is having on everyone.
Yeah.
Any other aha moments from the whole weekend from celebrating?
Well, I will say one thing that Shane said on the panel too, just because he's had a couple people in his life that has struggled with addiction. Like I remember him saying at one point, he would ask God, is this what you have for me? Is this the life that you've chosen? And just God telling him no. And just because, I mean, I've shared my story. I've literally had somebody in my life, my whole life, that has struggled with addiction, and how easy it is to, this is what I'm made to be. Like, and it's not. Like, God has so much more for me and for my kids. And like that just spoke to me. So I'm glad that he shared that, because it's not easy to share that part, and especially coming from a guy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad it worked out for him to be on the panel and everything as well. But it was an incredible time. If you were there, we didn't get to meet you. We're so sorry, but we still would love to meet you at one of our upcoming retreats.
Yes.
And so we're just getting started this year, and the retreats are going to be nothing that you learned at our events. Like, we're really excited what God has placed on our hearts to share at these retreats. So be sure to sign up.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you were there, thank you for being there. And if you're one of our amazing sponsors, we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you for helping sponsor this event. And thank you to all of our amazing Hope is Alive staff that made it possible, from behind the scenes to the media, to the marketing, to the videos, to helping set up, rolling t-shirts, to putting chairs on stages, from the little things. Yeah. We couldn't have done it without you. So thank you. But I like to leave with a challenge, right? Yes. And so my challenge today is, what are you holding back from? Are we truly abiding in God and his will? Or are you kind of outside that circle today? And maybe God's calling you, okay, I've listened to this podcast. We get those. Like, I've listened to your podcast. I've listened to this. When's the next episode coming out? But have you stepped into a meeting or jumped onto one of our Zoom meetings? So if you have not, reach out, findinghope.today, and we will get you connected. We call you personally when you sign up. Darcie calls you, or I call you. And so we want to talk to you and see what we can do to support you in that. My next challenge is sign up for our retreats.
Yes.
Like, don't let the dates, don't let I'm too busy stop you, because you will be filled, not just self-care, but soul care, like Lisa was talking about, throughout the whole weekend. And you'll find that family and community, like you talked about with the Zoom people coming together.
Yeah.
So those are my challenges. Find a meeting and get signed up for our retreats. So thank you guys so much for joining us this week. And you can learn more about Finding Hope at findinghope.today. But before you go, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review, share this on social media, and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss our next hope-filled episodes. Thanks again for joining me, Amy LaRue, and Miss Darcie Stevens on this episode of Finding Hope. And remember, you are not alone. It's not your fault. There is.